All right. Hey, everybody. Hello. I'll get started here in just a second here. I'm pulling up the last bit of things I need, and we will go live. All right. Hey, everybody. Hello. I'll get started here in just a second here. I'm pulling up the last All right. Things I need, and we will go live. All right. Hey, everybody. Hello. Is that a little bit better, News Nebraska? Hopefully that's a little bit better. By the time I get started here, you should have pretty decent volume because I'll be talking more into the mic a little bit better. All right. So, hey, welcome to the podcast here. I want to do a quick podcast because Eric Swalwell is at it again. He has released his gun control plan. And, of course, this gun control plan is absolute bunk. It's absolute crap. Everyone can hear me, right? All right, there we go. All right. So what I'm going to start with, before I get into the details of his plan, what I want to do is I kind of want to dissect an interview he had recently on ABC News, and I wanted to play this for you, and I'm going to kind of start and stop it because you need to hear it from his own mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, the Communist Manifesto is alive here in the United States. The plan that was put in place back in the 1960s in order for the communists to take over this country. And this is not a conspiracy radio or a conspiracy podcast or anything like that. This is what the communist plan, what they had put out quite some time ago about how they were going to overtake the U.S. government and infiltrate our politics and infiltrate our way of life here in the United States, how to undermine capitalism. They had a 45-point goal. There were 45 goals. These were read into the record, not 1969, excuse me, 1963. These were read into the record in the congressional record on January 10th, 1963. And there are several, these are the current communist goals as they were, 60 years ago, almost 60, well, over 60 years ago. 40, 50, yeah, about 60 years ago. I'm just going to read some of their 45 points here. And you can find them, if you just type in Communist Agenda United States, you'll find the list of the 45 communist goals that were read into the congressional record. And so number 13 is do away with loyalty oaths. Number 11, promote the United Nations as all the hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. So that was number 11. Again, 13, do away with loyalty oaths. I have to wonder if our law enforcement has started that with the way that that's going. Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. That's point 15. Use technical decisions of the courts. This is number 16. To weaken basic American institutions by claiming that their activities violate civil rights. Number 17, get control of the schools. Number 18, gain control of student newspapers. Number 19, use student riots to foment public protest against programs and organizations which are under communist attack. Can anybody say Antifa? And Antifa is openly flying the communist flag. They fly the communist hammer and sickle. They fly the Mao Chinese flag. So that's out there. Infiltrate the press. Number 20. 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. I don't think they've done that in radio, but they've definitely done that in TV and motion pictures. Here's one. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. I'm reading from the 45 communist goals that were read into the congressional record in 1963. That's what I'm reading. Just some of the points, not all of them. Here's number 24. Eliminate all laws concerning or governing obscenity by calling them censorship. Break down the moral standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity. Here's number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as, quote, natural, normal, and healthy. Infiltrate churches. Discredit the American institution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs. Anybody, you've heard how the Democrats are calling for the abolition of the Electoral College. So there's that. Number 30, discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for, quote, the common man. We're seeing that all over the place, taking statues down everywhere. Number 32, I'm skipping a couple of these because some of them are just, who cares? But I'm trying to cover the ones that are actually taking place right now in this country. Number 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. There you go. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions and big business. That was 36 and 37. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. There is not a government agency out there, it seems these days, that does not have a police force. So that is happening. CPS can, if they don't arrest you themselves, can use the law enforcement to do that. Discredit the family, number 40, as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Number 39, dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. And right now, we see the Democrat Party and many on the left as trying to do this right here, which was number 39, dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control. They're using that with their red flag laws. That is a communist point right there. So I wanted to read some of those away from you, or some of those here. Oh, here's number 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Governor Abbott just signed a law to expand pre-K for your 3- and 4-year-olds, people. They now want the education system to take over your children from the age of 3 years old. 3 years old. They've already taken over the education system through the regular elementary, middle school, and high school, as well as our upper education, supposedly upper education universities. And now they're trying to take them even earlier than that. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is these 45, and again, this was the 45 communist goals as read into the congressional record on January 10th, 1963 that I was reading from. I only read some of them. But if you do a Google for Communist Agenda United States, you're going to find that. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because Eric Swalwell has rolled out his gun control plan. Now, he did this outside the NRA headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia. Eric Swalwell went to NRA headquarters to have a rally. He's running for president in 2020 in the Democrat ticket and had all of 18 people show up. 18 people. That's 1-8. 1-8 people showed up. 18 people showed up to listen to Eric Swalwell roll out his plan to end gun violence. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about his plan to end gun violence, and we're going to break it down. First and foremost, point number 1 from Eric Swalwell: ban and buy back semi-automatic assault weapons. First of all, there is no definition in here about what an assault weapon is inside Eric Swalwell's plan here. No one can really explain what the federal definition of an assault weapon is to begin with, because everyone defines it somewhat differently. So really the only way that we can go back to is what did the old federal assault weapons ban, how did that define assault weapons? It included semi-automatic rifles with detachable magazines and at least 2 of these features: A pistol grip, a folding or telescoping stock, so almost every stock on an AR-15 these days. Remember, this was back in 1994 when AR-15s weren't that widespread, and most of the AR-15s back at the time had the old stocks that were like the old M16s, where they did not go in and out. They didn't telescope at all. They were not adjustable. And so most of them were built with a standard stock. So unlike today, nearly every AR-15 that you buy is going to have an adjustable stock of some sort, either adjustable or a folding or telescoping stock. So it's a semi-automatic rifle. This is according to the assault weapons ban of 1994, with a detachable magazine that has at least two features: a pistol grip, a folding or telescoping stock, a flash suppressor or threaded barrel, a bayonet mount, or a muzzle-mounted grenade launcher. Yeah, okay. Nearly every AR-15 today has already two of those features. Well, three of them, actually. You got the pistol grip, you got the folding telescoping stock, and you've got the threaded barrel where the flash suppressors are hooked on there. So if they use the old definition of what an assault weapon is, that's what the federal government would define it as. But today, nobody seems to know. Everybody's got a different idea of what an assault weapon is, and all of these definitions mean. Notice it doesn't say, other than the word semi-automatic, it doesn't say anything about caliber. It doesn't say anything about capability. It doesn't say anything about maximum effective range or even maximum range. It doesn't say anything about rounds per minute. It doesn't say anything about velocity. These are all cosmetic issues. An assault weapon by the federal standard back in 1994, and in the states where so-called assault weapons are banned, it's all cosmetic. It has absolutely nothing to do with the functionality of the gun. So Eric Swalwell's plan, number one, ban and buy back semi-automatic assault weapons. This is what he has to say on his website. You can go to Eric Swalwell. Don't go to Swallow's Well. ericswalwell.com/endgunviolence. Gun violence is a myth to begin with. Semi-automatic weapons, says Swalwell, are made for the military and police. Really? So here's an idea. What is a weapon that's not made for the military and police? What does that look like? Because my .45 here that I carry on a regular basis, this is my Sig Sauer Scorpion, Emperor Scorpion, my everyday carry. It's a .45 caliber. Yes, it's loaded. Is a .45 caliber. It's got the rail on the bottom here, the Picatinny rail. Some nice glow-in-the-dark sights. I love this gun. I have two of them. It's my favorite pistol of all time. I'm a 1911 fan to begin with, but this is by far my favorite 1911, and I got a little scratch on it there. Is my Sig Sauer Scorpion. Love this thing. It's awesome. But the 1911 was originally made for troops. So is this a military weapon? I mean, according to Eric Swalwell, he says semi-automatic assault weapons. And by the way, there are some states and there's actually a proposal in Congress right now that would define an assault weapon as any weapon that has a threaded barrel, including handguns and shotguns, any weapon that takes a detachable magazine that holds more than 7 rounds. So this gun right here would be considered an assault weapon, the one that I carry on me every day. But he says semi-automatic assault weapons were made for the military and police, but no one seems to understand. What does that mean? All of our firearms originated with a military purpose, whether it's a handgun or a rifle. I mean, in the early days, it was a revolver. You look at the old 1896, 1899, 1898 revolvers that were used by the early military. The National Guard and the militias had ball and cap revolvers. Those were military purposed. The musket was used for military and police. Bows and arrows back in the day were military use. So anyway, he says semi-automatic weapons were made for the military and the police. Well, so were bolt-action rifles, because some of the sniper rifles that are used in the military are bolt-action. What about that? He says they're weapons built for carnage. No, they're weapons built to kill what they aim at. That's what all weapons are for. What's the point of buying a weapon that was not built to kill somebody? Because the point is to protect your life. At least stop somebody. At least stop somebody. That's what guns are there for, is to stop people. He says that these weapons are built for maximum, or for carnage. They're powerful enough. I kid you not, I'm reading this from his website. They are powerful enough to blow through bulletproof vests and usually have large capacity magazines that can be quickly replaced. I don't know how many soldiers are listening to this, Marines, whatever, that have been to combat and been shot by, but been shot by a 7.62, even an AK-47 round. Those things don't go through bulletproof vests. And I guess it depends on what kind of bulletproof vest you got. But the AR-15, which typically uses a .223 round or a 5.56 round, depending on which one you have, is not going to go through a bulletproof vest. I guess if you're really, really close. Let's keep going. That is why they are often the weapon of choice for mass murderers. False. 100% false. Do you know what kind of weapon is actually used the most in shootings? It's a 9mm handgun. Most active shooters use pistols, not rifles. And this is according to the FBI. And what I did was I pulled up a story here from The Trace. Anybody that knows what The Trace is a Bloomberg propaganda site. It's an anti-gun propaganda site. And this is the Trace, the anti-gun propaganda wing of the gun control movement. This is where they push junk science and everything. Even The Trace admits, here's the title of their article from August 28th of last year, 2018. Most active shooters use pistols, not rifles, according to FBI data. And then you can read the whole thing. I'm not going to go through all that crap. But if you scroll down, it says active shooter events by weapon type. Pistol, 57%. Now, keep in mind as well, what they're defining as an active shooter is kind of nonsense as well. So let's just sink that down. Pistol, 56%, rifle, 27%, and that's all rifles, by the way. All rifles. Doesn't even have to be necessarily an AR-15, AK-47, and what Mr. Swalwell here is calling an assault weapon. It's just all rifles, 27%, which also includes bolt-action rifles. Shotgun, 14%, and then 3% are unknown. And that's an anti-gun website that's saying that, and this is the Bloomberg funded, this is the same group that funds the group that Eric Swalwell loves to suck up to, which is Everytown for gun-dense people in America. So he says right there, this is why they are often the weapon of choice for mass murders, and it's a blatant lie. He says that is why they need to be banned in the United States for civilians outside shooting ranges and hunting clubs. A ban and buyback plan is an investment in the right to live. Now, what I want to do is I want to get to what he actually says here. And I want to play, whoops, I pushed the wrong button here. I want to play in his words as he's describing this.
Thank you, Anna. And that's because this isn't about the NRA, but they have for too long been in the way and prevented us from doing anything about it. And I stood today in front of gun violence survivors.
Now, keep in mind, he's talking about this is after he did his event in front of NRA headquarters. So this was Eric Swalwell in front of the NRA headquarters, and he's got a maximum 18 people. That's what he had. He had 18 people. This is but listen how he describes these 18 people who showed up at his little gun control rally outside the NRA headquarters.
trauma surgeons, community leaders, people from Chicago, Houston, Indiana, and from all over our country who are saying enough is enough.
That's wow. 18 people where he was able to pull them from all over this place. I wonder if he was counting his own campaign staff when he's talking about where all these people are from. I bet you that's his campaign staff.
Not only are we going to ban and buy back assault weapons under my plan, I'm the only candidate calling for that.
So what if okay, so two things. First of all, I am willing to allow the government to buy back my rifles. I'm going to charge $150,000 for each one. So, government, come to me. I've got several. You just let me know how many you want to buy. I'll let you know if I have that many. But for the meager price tag of $150,000, that should be nothing for a government that pays $4,000 for a toilet seat. I will allow you, Eric Swalwell, I will sell you back, apparently I bought them from you, I don't know. I will sell you back my AR-15, but for $150,000. Now, if you want the extra stuff inside it, if you want my scope, that's going to be an extra $10,000. If you want the pistol grip or the foregrip, excuse me, that's going to be another $2,000 for that. My magazines, my 30-round magazines, I will sell those to you for, let's say, $750. I'll go cheap on those. You can have my magazines for $750 a piece, and I think that'll cover it. So first of all, yeah, I'll sell you my rifles. It's just $150,000. Just come to me with the check. Bring at least $500,000. I'll tell you that much. Bring at least $500,000, and you can have a few of them in my collection. So there you go, Eric. I agree. You're going to have a voluntary, right? It's a voluntary buyback, ban and buyback. And so I voluntarily will give you the right to buy my guns for only $150,000. That's it. $150,000, that should cover everything.
We're also going to invest in the root causes of gun violence in many of our cities.
Which is Democrats. There you go. That's the root causes. Since Democrats are the ones that have pushed laws that have disarmed the American people, and therefore we have more gun violence today. But here's the thing. Let me go back to the gun buyback, by the way. I have a question for Eric that none of these media talking heads, even on ABC here, have refused to acknowledge or ask Eric Swalwell. And that is, Eric, because I'm telling you right now, if you do an Australian-style ban and buyback, a mandatory buyback, what if I refuse to sell you back my guns? Well, then what are you going to do? I mean, I know what he's going to do because he's already said what he's going to do. He's said it in the past already. Here's what he's going to do if you refuse to do what I'm going to do, which is I'm going to refuse to buy them back.
New Zealand was still mourning their dead, and they passed an assault weapons ban. So my ban would, buy back assault weapons. There's about 15 million of them. If you want to still possess them and not sell them back, you can keep them at a hunting club or a shooting range. I just don't think they belong in our churches, our theaters, at our shopping centers, at our concerts anymore.
And people would go to jail if they didn't hand those back.
We're not going to send cops, house to house, but like any other contraband, if you have it and you're, not supposed to, yeah, you would go to jail.
No, so you're gonna go to jail. So here, let me continue down this road, Mr. Swallowswell. You do a gun buyback, and I refuse to sell. So you say now I've got contraband, and I would have to go to jail. How am I going to go to jail? How are you going to get me from my home, where I have these rifles that you're trying to force me to sell to you, that I refuse to sell to you? But what if I refuse to go to jail for owning something that was legal before you took over? What if I do that? What if I refuse to do that? So here's what's going to happen. You're sitting here talking about, I am a guy who you will never have to worry about gun violence for, except in self-defense. I want an end to gun violence, so-called gun violence as well. Gun violence is a myth. Let's just make that very clear. But I want an end to gun violence as well. I just obviously think there's a different way of going about that. But I am not a person that you have to worry about a mass shooting. You have to worry about a bank robbery. You have to worry about someone breaking into your home and shooting people. You have to worry about shooting up a church. You have to worry about shooting up Congress. You don't have to worry about me going to a baseball field and shooting politicians. You don't have to worry about that unless you come to take my guns. Then I guarantee you there will be gun violence. I'm telling you right now, if you come to take my guns away, there will be gun violence. If you leave me alone, there will not be gun violence. So you see how in the name of ending gun violence, they create gun violence, because there are many of us, thousands, maybe tens of thousands. I don't know how many people are willing to actually shoot in defense of their rights. But I'm telling you right now, let's go to an alternate universe where Eric Swalwell has more than a 0.25% chance of becoming elected. Well, hell, he's got a 0.25% chance of just getting his party's nomination, much less getting elected. So he's probably got a 0.001% chance of getting elected as president. So that let's take that to its natural progression. Eric Swalwell gets elected. Yeah. Gets elected, bans so-called assault rifles based on an arbitrary definition that government officials make up and put on a piece of paper. I refuse, and many Americans refuse to sell back my guns, and then you send armed thugs to come get them and a shootout ensues. That's where this goes. And then, by the way, I might die. There is a high probability, probably 99% probability, that I am going to die, because the only way I'm going out of that house alive is that I've run out of ammunition, which in my house is very difficult. But we're going to get to that, because Swalwell's got a plan for that as well. I run out of ammunition, or you kill me. Well, or you somehow incapacitate me, and I'm only injured to the point where I can't pick up a gun, but you're able to save my life in the hospital. Those are the only ways I'm coming out alive. That's it. And really, it's probably going to be that I run out of ammunition. But the likelihood, if you come to get my guns, of me coming out alive is very low. Now, and I'm not going to be the only one that's dead, by the way. I'm not. I don't want that. I really don't. I want to avoid that. Obviously, the best way to avoid that is to prevent Eric Swalwell from becoming the president. But let's get back to Swalwell's gun plan here.
Like just a lack of education and jobs or gang violence prevention programs, but also put in place a licensing requirement and an insurance requirement. Again, we believe we're the only campaign calling for an insurance requirement on all firearm purchases in America.
So Eric Swalwell not only wants to ban the most popular guns in America, but he wants to force you to get a federal license, i.e., what's that called, folks? Registration. If you remember, that's what the Weimar regime did, was, just peaceful registration. We just need to know who's got the guns. The Weimar regime, of course, is what the Hitler regime and the Third Reich overtook. And so whether or not they had peaceful means or not, the first thing that the Weimar regime did was start licensing people at the federal level. Well, they didn't really have a federalist system, so at the state level, which was Germany. So Eric Swalwell not only wants you to have to get a government permission slip from the very people who are constitutionally prohibited from forcing you to get a government permission slip, but he also wants you to get insurance. Insurance. You have to pay for insurance in order to just buy a gun.
A number of candidates have already put out their gun licenses are part of those. They're in their proposals, similar to driver's licenses. Cory Booker is talking about banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines and expanding background checks to include purchases from unlicensed sellers. Kamala Harris has said she'll ban all imports of AR-15-style weapons, and that's just to name a few. You listed a couple of points of your plan, but what makes your plan better?
First of all, none of these plans are good. All of these plans are bad, and all of these plans are going to lead to a civil war. But you notice what she does not ask. This is the mainstream media here. You notice the question she does not ask Eric Swalwell. Swalwell just laid out a plan for literally increasing gun violence in America. And that comes through confiscation or attempted confiscation. We talk about wanting to save, these people talk about wanting to protect our police officers. You are not protecting police officers if you send them to take our guns. They will die. More of us might die, but they will die. And once enough of us die, the rest of us are going to rise up. Because the cowards are finally going to get off their seat and go, what the hell? Why are Americans dying just to protect what they have that they legally own? They go to work on a daily basis, minding their own business, and now you're going to wake up the giant. Those butters out there, although you're always going to have those people, look, it's the law. I mean, gosh, they passed an assault weapons ban. Oh, we need to register our guns. Let's go line up and get registered, folks. Oh, we need to get a license. Let's go line up and get a license. You're not a responsible American if you don't obey the law. And the law says, go and get yourself a license and go and get yourself insurance. Where can I sign up for that insurance? Yes, please. I'll take 2. That's what, unfortunately, most gun owners today are like. But once those of us who actually believe in liberty and rights start shooting back, and we start getting killed, well, actually, probably what these butters are going to do, I support the Second Amendment, but they're probably going to be like, well, you shouldn't have gotten in a shootout with the police. See, that's what happens when you shoot at cops. You're going to get killed. Never mind the fact that the cops are out there confiscating guns. So, police, I'm telling you right now, if these policies are put in effect, what are you going to do? Cops, police, peace officers, law enforcement, are you going to enforce the law that was written that says you have to come and take my guns? And are you going to put your life at risk and the fact that you might not be able to go home at night to your family because I'm not turning over my guns peacefully? This is a promise. This isn't internet bluster. Anybody that's seen my videos knows that I'm not going to sit here anymore. Now, my first arrest, I didn't fight. I resisted a little bit, but I was new to this. I didn't realize how bad the problem was. But you look at some of my most recent stuff, I'm willing to fight. I flat out told a DPS trooper, when she tried to stop me at the Capitol because I was carrying an AR pistol, and she put her hand on my chest, and I told her flat out, and I was serious as a heart attack, you touch me again and I will defend myself. And that's exactly what I was going to do. Thankfully, another trooper came and pulled her away. In Olmos Park, the police were trying to arrest me. Did I go peacefully? Heck no. It took them tasing me for them to take me down. What am I? Oh, let me back up. Okay, sorry about that. I got a little excited there. This stuff I'm passionate about this. I am passionate about this because I don't want this country to become what we got away from in the 18th century, which was freedom. Got away from tyranny, and we moved towards freedom. And we recognized through our founding document that we needed to enshrine those liberties. All right, let's go back to Swalwell's answer here. But I wanted to bring up, did you notice that the reporter didn't say a thing about how are you going to enforce this? You say you're going to do X, Y, and Z, that you're going to ban this and buy back that, but how are you going to enforce it? What about those people? This is the question I want to ask Eric Swalwell as well. What about those people like me, Eric, who I'm telling you right now, I will not give up my guns, and you are telling me if I don't give up my guns, I'm going to go to jail. What if I say no? Are you prepared? Are you prepared for that kind of violence?
Well, it's led by somebody who is a father who worries about his own son's safety at school. As president, I'll worry about your kid's safety every day. It's a prosecutor. I worked in Oakland, California for 7 years. I've seen the causes of street violence. And as a Judiciary Committee member in the House, I worked to help pass background checks and have authored a No Guns for Abusers Act. So from all angles, I've worked on this issue and would be ready on day one to lead on it. But I'm also not afraid to seize the momentum that we have. We beat 17 endorsed members of Congress this last election cycle. I'm ready to negotiate up rather than down on all of these issues.
Yeah, the momentum that you have, of 18 people showing up at your rallies, that's quite the momentum there. If those 18 people come after me to try and take my guns because they're the ones that support your asinine policies, well, heck, I only need half a magazine for that. All right, let's go back. So that was Eric Swalwell talking about his policy there of turning in guns, taking away our guns and stuff. Let's go back to his website, ericswalwell.com/end gun violence if you want to kind of read along with me. So here's how he says a buyback plan is an investment in the right to live. Funny how he thinks he's so he talks about a right to live, but he if you go in there, he supports abortion on this website as well, by the way. He's going to ban civilian possession of military-style semi-automatic assault weapons with an exception. Shooting ranges, probably 4, so he can't even grammatically put his website together correctly. With an exception, I'm going to put a sick 4, shooting ranges and hunting clubs. What is, again, a military-style semi-automatic assault weapon? This 45 is a military-style semi-automatic, and under some definitions, depending on what state law you look at, is an assault weapon. Literally, in some states, this is an assault weapon. Why? Because it holds more than seven rounds. And I just dropped the magazine all the way out. It's a very good pistol. Let's see. This one holds. It holds 8 rounds. It's a single stack. But I do have guns that hold more than that. No, I'm not unsafe. A magazine falling out of the grip is not unsafe. All right, so piss off. But this would be considered an assault weapon. But it's also a military style semi-automatic assault weapon under some definitions of what a Democrat would call it. Why? Because it was first made for the military in 1911. That's right. Pretty old gun. It works really well. I know all the Glock fans out there are like, oh my gosh, he's got a freaking, look at that big giant piece of steel. Anyway, next, he's going to buy back. So first he's going to ban them. He says, oh, you can't have them. Ban them. Then he says buy back. Why can't they just say buy or forced to sell? Because you're not buying back anything. I didn't buy any of my guns from the government. I guess technically I might have bought one of my guns from the government because I bought it from the PX on Fort Hood. And that's a government base. And I'll never buy another gun from a military exchange because you've got to register it on the post. I didn't realize that I had to register the gun on base, even though I was never going to keep it on base. So the military knows of at least one of my guns. Anyway, so buy back military-style semi-automatic weapons from anyone who chooses to follow the law. I love this. I love that question. Or I love the way he phrases that. Buy back military-style semi-automatic assault weapons from anyone who chooses to follow the law. What if I choose not to follow an unconstitutional law? Oh, here's what he's going to do. Point 3, he's going to criminally prosecute any person caught defying the law. Eric Swalwell is going to create felons out of thin air. This is why I don't believe in disarming felons either, because all the government has to do, this is why I don't support disarming felons. The number of felonies in this country since the Brady Act was passed has increased 700%. The number of felonies in this country has increased over 700% since the Brady Act was put into place. And keep in mind, anyone with a felony is prohibited from being able to carry firearms or purchase firearms. So what's to stop the government from just making everything a felony? And I guarantee you that if Swalwell, his policy is put into place, I guarantee you that possession of one of these is going to be a felony. I guarantee it. All right. Point 2, invest in hope in our neighborhoods. I'm going to skip some of this stuff because it's just feel good, hokey crap, It's just nonsense stuff. All right. Number 3, tackle America's firearm suicide epidemic. Every single day in this country, he says, around 59 people die from suicide. Those are 22,000 Americans who die each year. A disproportionate number of them are middle-aged men and senior citizens, but over the past 10 years, firearm suicide has risen more than 60% among children and teenagers. I think the reason that over the past 10 years, more people have committed suicide is because for 8 of those years, they had to live under Obama. And then for the final 2 years, liberals just can't stand the fact that they lost and are probably offing themselves. Who knows? Our country's suicide problem is a gun problem. That's because suicide attempts are often impulsive. 7 out of 10 people who attempt suicide do so within an hour of deciding to end their lives. And guns are made to kill. If someone, listen, folks, if someone in Japan, one of the countries with the largest suicide rates in the world is Japan. And the UK, by the way, is catching up. Japan has one of the largest suicide rates in the world, and it is nearly impossible to own anything better than a bolt-action rifle in .22 caliber. It's not a gun problem. If people want to commit suicide, they're going to commit suicide. And you know why I think there's a rise in government suicide? I have a feeling that if you were to graph this out, that the rise in government control over every aspect of your life through regulation and laws is probably commensurate with the rise in suicide. The more the government controls every aspect of your life and you have no control over how to live your life, the less it's worth living. Now, I don't think life is less worth living because of government control. I just think it's more worth fighting for. And so instead of committing suicide, what I would hope is more people fight the real enemy, which is not themselves. Suicide's wrong. It's bad. I say this as someone who has tried to commit suicide in the past. I don't know where I was in those days. I look back on that and I think, how did I get there? Guess what? I didn't use a gun either time. But I can tell you right now that a law against me owning a firearm, if I feel suicidal, is not going to prevent me from killing myself. There are plenty of ways to do that. This isn't a gun problem. It's a people problem. We need to stop focusing on the means and start focusing on the whys. It doesn't matter how we kill ourselves or kill others. The real question, if you really want to solve gun violence in this country, is not to find out and decide and determine what people are using to commit gun violence, but why they're doing so. And until you solve the why to any problem, whether it's suicide or mass shootings, whatever, it doesn't matter how, because people will find a way. And I love the Japanese people, by the way. I lived in Japan for 7 years growing up. My dad was stationed there twice. All right, he talks about, of course, red flag laws, mitigate and prevent mass shootings. So, I wanted to get into this part. This is point 5 of Swalwell's plan. Mass shootings are an almost daily occurrence in the United States. Things are so bad that from 2013 to 2019, there was exactly 1 week in which the United States did not suffer from a mass shooting. Keep in mind, folks, this is bogus, absolutely false. Absolutely false and discredited. That is, there have not been that many mass shootings. What the left is doing is they're redefining what a mass shooting is. If someone decides, I'm going to kill my wife and then myself because I'm an idiot, that's a mass shooting to a leftist. And that has nothing to do with anything. If a gang member goes out and shoots a whole bunch of people up, instead of it being a gang issue, it's a mass shooting. Everything these days is a mass shooting. A few years later, 7 people were, talks about 1999, the Columbine High School. A few years later, Red Lake High School. Then he talks about West Nichols Mine School. 32 people were killed at Virginia Tech. 5 were killed in Northern Illinois University, 7 at Oikos University, 26 at Sandy Hook, 5 at Santa Monica College, 4 at Marysville Pilchuck High School, 9 at Umpqua Community College, 17 at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, 10 at Santa Fe. The common denominator, according to Eric Swalwell, is guns. I think there's another common denominator. And I bet you guys know what that common denominator really is. Every single one of those places that Eric Swalwell mentioned is a gun-free zone. It's a place where people were not supposed to have guns. So my question to Eric Swalwell is, how is it possible that at a place with the ultimate in gun control, think about this, gun-free zones, schools, most schools, not here in Texas. I mean, schools here in Texas have a choice, and many schools have chosen to allow faculty to defend themselves. Moody School District here in Texas is one of those. But if you have a gun-free zone and people are still getting shot, how is it possible that the one place where it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you have a background check, it doesn't matter if you got your gun at a gun show, it doesn't matter if you're old enough, it doesn't matter if you're young enough, it doesn't matter what kind of gun you have. At a school is supposed to have a magical barrier around it that prevents everything. It is the leftist utopia of gun control, because it doesn't matter if you have a license. It doesn't matter if you once served in law enforcement, although some states have exemptions for law enforcement and former law enforcement. It does not matter. A gun is banned in every single one of those places. That is the utopian idea of gun control. This is what the left wants to make for the entire country. The left wants to make the entire country a gun-free zone. And yet still in these gun-free zones, as Swalwell mentioned here, you have people getting shot. You would think that the common denominator is that, not guns. So, anyway, he talks about that. All right, number 6. This is the one I really wanted to get to because this cracks me up. And this is going to be fun to watch in the comments section because as I read this, I really want to know from you guys out there, I want to know what, well, I don't think it's important that I know how many rounds you guys have, but I really want to know what you think of this policy of what Eric Swalwell is talking about. So, all right, this is point 6, secure all sales of firearms and ammunition. He says, purchasing a deadly weapon in the United States is far too easy. You can buy a gun from a storefront dealer who only sells firearms and ammunition. You can buy a gun from a dealer who operates out of their home. You can buy a gun at a gun show. You can buy a gun from a private seller. Sometimes federal law requires you to undergo a background check. Sometimes it does not. When it comes to ammunition, there are even more purchase options, and buyers never have to go through a background check unless you live in California. In California now, in order to buy ammunition, you have to have a background check on ammunition. The Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives engage in very little oversight of firearms sales, and which is completely false again, another lie. And federal law prohibits ATF from modernizing many of its records. In other words, what the federal law does is it requires the government to keep a paper record, which is the 4473. But they cannot create a database, an online or searchable database. If there's a video somewhere here on YouTube about how the ATF does background checks and what they have to do. They have connexes full of 4473s. And what they do is they're arranged by date and I think location. I can't remember if it's location and date, but if law enforcement wants to do a background check on a gun, if they want to find out when it was purchased and all that, the ATF literally has to thumb through millions of documents, like actual paper documents. But what the left wants to do is they want to modernize this, and that's what they're calling it. They're calling it modernized. But really what they're trying to do is make it easier for government to track you through an online system. And federal law right now prohibits the ATF from having an online system in which to track people who are buying guns. Now, I learned about this because one of the remember, I've got a lawsuit against Almost Park right now. And as part of that lawsuit, we did discovery. And there's a lot of stuff. I cannot wait until this case is over with. There is a lot of good. People should go to jail, by the way. People should go to jail. Let me tell you some of the things that, well, I don't want to get off track too much. I'll stick to this topic. Maybe I'll do a video later of some of the cool things that we found. I can't show you the evidence. Maybe I can talk about it. I don't know. But they ran background checks on the handgun that I was carrying, the one I just showed you earlier. This particular firearm I bought at Fort Hood on Black Friday. It was a great deal. I got a great deal on it. And so in that discovery request, I got the background check on my pistol. They actually had, Almost Park actually had in their hands quite quickly, as a matter of fact, which is why I'm never going to buy a gun on a military base again, because it should not have been this quick. Or maybe it was that quick because it was such a recent purchase. I'd only purchased the gun maybe 6 months prior to Almost Park. But they actually had a photocopy of my 4473 that I filled out when I bought that handgun in Almost Park. That's scary. And Swalwell wants to modernize that. Getting back to his website, perhaps most egregiously, according to Swalwell, federal law does not prohibit people like the Las Vegas mass murderer from stockpiling an arsenal of weapons and ammunition. In fact, the Las Vegas shooter was able to lawfully purchase 33 rifles and hoard more than 1,600 rounds of ammunition in the 12 months before he killed 58 people and shot another 500. Our laws, or lack thereof, are killing thousands of Americans, and an NRA-backed federal law makes it virtually impossible to sue gun manufacturers. Good. If someone runs me over, should I be able to sue Subaru because it was a Subaru that they ran me over with? If someone beats me over the head with a Louisville Slugger, should I be able to sue Louisville Slugger because I got hit with one of their baseball bats? And because the left is so anti-gun and trying to do everything to undermine our rights, we needed a federal law to protect gun manufacturers, because that's the only manufacturer out of all the things that people use to kill others. Guns are the only thing that the left was trying to sue in order to hold them the shooters accountable. So he calls it a stockpile, 1,600 rounds. That's what I take to a range on a Saturday. And here's what he's going to do. This is how he's going to enforce this. Implement background checks for all firearms and ammunition. He wants to make America like California, is really what he wants to do. And by the way, Swalwell is from California, for those of you who didn't know. He's a Californian. Implement background checks for all firearm and ammunition purchases, regardless of whether the seller is federal licensed, a gun show vendor, or a private seller. So if you wanted to buy 20 rounds from me, let's say we go to a range and you ran out of ammo because you only had 1,800 rounds, or you only had 1,400 and I had 1,600. And you wanted to, hey, can I buy a box of ammo off you? I ran out. And I wanted to sell you 20. According to Swalwell, I'd have to do a background check on you before I could sell you a box of 20 shotgun shells. If we're out hunting and you brought a bunch of boxes of shotgun shells, but, oh, crap, only one box was 12 gauge, and you brought the rest of them were 20 gauge accidentally. Well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a background check on you. Can't give you any more. He's going to reinstate President Obama's executive action to stop firearm purchases by people who receive Social Security checks for mental illness. In other words, he's going to reinstate the unconstitutional executive action done by President Obama that President Trump dismantled. He's going to require all background checks to include a search of the National Data Exchange's 400 million records, a policy that, had it been in place, would have blocked the Charleston shooter from lawfully buying the rifle he used to commit mass murder. In other words, it was a government failure. No, the government, if it would have done its job, would have stopped the Charleston shooter. Absolutely. I'm going to skip down to some of these. Create a federal licensing program for gun owners. This is patently unconstitutional. Create a federal licensing program for gun owners, requiring them to satisfactorily complete the training program with both written and practical exams, the same way most states do with cars and hunters. So the Constitution says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Supreme Court has already recognized that the federal government cannot regulate firearms. They cannot keep you from keeping and bearing arms. A federal licensing program for gun owners would be illegal because if the government passes a law that says you cannot carry a firearm unless you have a federal license, well, they have just infringed on your rights because now you have to go to them. That is a direct infringement. Next, require liability insurance be purchased before a person can buy, trade, or otherwise receive a firearm, which is what states already require for automobiles. Again, an automobile is not a constitutionally protected activity. Now, I would say that driving is constitutionally protected. We've got several court cases that have already said that. The right to travel is already codified in the Ninth Amendment. This is one of the reasons why I want to be an attorney. I think one of the most underused amendments in the federal Constitution in fighting for liberty in this country is the Ninth Amendment. I can't find any cases where the Ninth Amendment is argued, especially in gun rights cases, but where the Ninth Amendment is used, because I would say this is what I would like to do. If I were an attorney, one of the things I want to do is I want to take a case of somebody who's speeding or driving without a license, specifically driving without a license. I would like to take, once I'm an attorney, I will take the first person who's got a ticket, pro bono, of driving without a license, and take that all the way up to the Supreme Court, because I believe that the Ninth Amendment gives us an inalienable right to travel. I have a right to get from point A to point B, and I have a right to the means of that travel. Again, there is case law already that the highways and byways are not privileges, they are rights. And so I think that the Ninth Amendment right to travel, the rights of travel, is included in the Ninth Amendment. There are several amendments included in the Ninth Amendment. There is the right not to be harassed by government officials. There is the right for me to choose whatever kind of sandwich I want to eat, whatever kind of meat I can afford to buy in the Ninth Amendment. There is the right for me as a glaringly white boy who blinds people in direct sunlight for me to wear shorts or pants as I see fit. That is included in the Ninth Amendment. The fact that I'm doing this podcast right now, in addition to the First Amendment, is, I think, under the Ninth Amendment. So once I'm an attorney here in about 3 years, I'm going to start taking these cases, especially about the right to drive, the right to travel, and I would like to see some case law on the Ninth Amendment. It's the most underused amendment that we have. Everyone likes to argue the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and the 14th Amendment, but no one argues the Ninth Amendment. Rights not reserved to the federal, those issues not specifically reserved to the federal or state. The federal government, is reserved to the states and individuals. I'm paraphrasing. Sorry, I didn't memorize exactly. So there we go with that. All right. But he's talking about trying to force you to have liability insurance like you do with a car. Now, here's a communist agenda. I talked about earlier the communist goals. If you tuned in at the beginning of the show, I read several communist goals in the country that were read into the congressional record back in 1963. This fulfills one of those. Create a national firearm registry that is linked to individual firearms and require that all purchases, transfers, and donations of firearms be mandatorily registered. What does registered lead to? I really don't like when people talk about Hitler and I mean, it's too easy. It's too easy to compare statism in America to Nazism in Nazi Germany. But let's assume here for a minute that Swalwell has a noble purpose in registering firearms. Let's just assume that his noble purpose is that he just wants to keep America safe. And that's why he wants to create a national firearm registry, because he wants to make sure that the wrong people, the bad guys, don't have guns. Sounds noble, right? I mean, if a guy's going to go and commit murder, why would you want that guy to have a gun? I mean, I have a gun because there are people like that exist, but I get, let's just pretend that that's his noble purpose. Well, that was the same purpose of the Weimar regime. When they instituted their licensing or their registry for firearms in Germany, and again, this is before Hitler, they did this registration with noble means. They just wanted to make sure that the wrong people weren't in possession of firearms. Well, what that became was they wanted to make sure their political opponents didn't have firearms. And then what that became was they wanted to make sure that the Jews didn't have firearms. And then that became they wanted to make sure that no one except the Nazis had firearms. And what Hitler did was he took those quote-unquote noble intentions of a firearms registry, and what Hitler now had in his hand is a by name, by address, by firearm list of exactly where all the guns were in Germany, who had them, and how to get them. That is why you don't support a registry, no matter how good it sounds. Like Sound Mind says there in the chats, registration leads to confiscation, confiscation leads to tyranny. Absolutely, 100%. Swalwell wants to prohibit individuals from purchasing more than one handgun per 30-day period. Now, I have a question about this because on Black Friday here last year, I bought a handgun and I got another free gun, a little .22 revolver. You buy I think it was a Smith & Wesson. I got so many guns, I don't remember which one I bought. And it came with a free .22 revolver. Yeah, it's a $99 revolver. It wasn't like an expensive one. It's not one I would use as an everyday carry by any means. So would stores stop having those? What if I want more than one? What if these are my first guns I'm ever purchasing, and I want my handgun, my everyday carry, and I want my backup because I always carry at least 2 guns on me at all times. Under Swalwell, I have to wait a whole month to get my backup gun. What if I want to buy one? What if I'm newly married and I want to buy a gun for me and I want to buy a gun for my wife? What, I got to wait 30 days now to get one for my wife? That's freaking nonsense. All right, I'm going to skip down here. Okay, require that, excuse me. Require that all people and businesses selling more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition in a 30-day period be federally licensed in a program. So if I were to sell, let's say I go to the range often, and I'm a guy, which I am, every time I get paid, I buy ammo. I'm not going to say how much, but every payday, I buy more ammo. It's like some people put money into a savings account, which we try to do. We don't do it as much. But some people try to put money into a savings account. For me, every time I get paid, I go out and buy more ammo. And there's a reason for that. First of all, I like shooting, right? I love shooting. Emmanuel, I do have 2 1911s, and I have a very good belt that I wear when I'm wearing my 2 1911s. One on my left, one on my right. Yes, you do need a good belt, or you do need some really good suspenders. So if I'm one of these guys that I've always got extra ammo, and I go to the range a lot, and I have no problem, oh, you need some extra ammo? Here, I'll sell you a box of 20 or 50 or whatever, depending if it's handgun or rifle. If I sell more than 1,000, they're going to require me to get an FFL under Swalwell thing. He wants to prohibit the online sale of ammunition, and here's the one I really want to get to, right here. Limit ammunition sales for individual purchasers, you and me, to 200 rounds per 30-day period. So every 30 days, you can only purchase 200 rounds, no matter how much you shoot at the range, which Swalwell seems to think that we're all going to just keep our guns at a range. But he doesn't want us to go to the range to become better shooters because we'd only be able to shoot 200 rounds for each 30-day period. I go through 200 rounds at the range in about 10 minutes. That's like 10 magazines. That's like 10 reloads. When I'm out there shooting and doing target practice or engaging in, what about these people who are sports shooters? Olympic athletes. Well, who cares about any of these people? What about you and me? If I want more than 200 rounds of ammunition in a 30-day period, I'm going to have more than 200 rounds in a 30-day period. And it's because I have a nice stockpile of ammunition, I will take friends out shooting. And, when I've got 2, 3, or 4 people out there with me shooting and I'm providing the guns and the ammunition, 200 rounds is like one circle of people. That's nothing. Now I got to wait 30 days to replenish that? That's absolute nonsense. It's nonsense anyway. But what he wants to do is he also wants to, not only are you limited to 200 rounds per 30-day period, but this is another point. He wants to prohibit you and me from hoarding, in his words, hoarding ammunition in quantities exceeding 200 rounds per caliber or gauge. So you can only have 200 rounds of 9mm. You can only have 200 rounds of 40 cal. You can only have 200 rounds of 12 gauge shotgun. Man, that's going to suck in hunting season when you're shooting doves. Can you imagine that? Man, you better shoot 2 or 3 doves with every round. Otherwise, you're going to run out quick before the hunting season's over. That's one Saturday. The final thing I'm going to talk about because you can go to read this. Look, if you want to read this, go to ericswalwell.com/endgunviolence. Why am I covering this? This guy has no chance of being the president. He has no chance of winning the Democratic nomination at all. But a lot of these things are what are being passed in the states. And a lot of these things, many of the Democrat candidates are pushing. And I'm going to tell you this, because Eric Swalwell's plan is probably the most communist of all of them. And what's going to happen is the left, all the candidates in the Democrat primary, are going to see this, and they're going to be like, oh, crap, I need to add this to my plan. And as candidates like Swalwell, I guarantee you after these debates, probably after the first caucus, Swalwell is going to be gone. He's going to be gone. And these other Democrats are going to want his endorsement, these other candidates. And so they're going to start pushing more to the left, and they're going to start adopting Eric Swalwell's plan. But this is a roadmap. I mean, Swalwell lays out the Communist Manifesto right here in his end gun violence plan. That's why I'm bringing it up. Not because it has any chance of ever getting passed by a President Swalwell, but because this is a roadmap for other Democrats. This is what they aspire to do. Every Democrat supports this, whether they admit it right now or not. Finally, ban and buy back bump stocks, large capacity magazines that are capable of holding more than 10 rounds of ammunition, and silencers. Well, he calls them silencers. So not only is he going to ban and buy back your assault rifles, but he's going to ban and buy back bump stocks, large capacity. Where's he going to get all this money? Where the hell is the federal government going to get all of this money to buy back millions and millions of large capacity, so-called large capacity? They're really standard capacity magazines, but anything holding more than 10 rounds. I mean, it's probably billions. When you go to magazines, let me ask you all this in the chat room here, because this isn't a big deal. I'm not asking you how many firearms you own, but how many, let's just say per rifle, because that way you're not really telling me how many magazines you have, but per rifle, how many magazines do you have per firearm? Let's just say per firearm. For me personally, I would say I have about 7 or 8 magazines per firearm that I have, because I like being a military guy. I want a full combat load for anything I'm carrying. And if I have to arm my neighbors in the next apocalypse or in the next revolution, I want to make sure they have a full combat load too. So if I need to offload a rifle to a neighbor to help me fight tyrants, I want to make sure that they're as well armed as I am. So I have about 7 to 8 on average in what he's calling a large capacity, because he says more than 10 rounds. So by his definition, I have about 7 to 8 magazines per firearm that I own. We've got 10 on average there. One of the listeners says he's got about 10 per firearm. So we're talking, if there's, I don't know how many AR-15s there are. Let's check this real quick. How many AR-15s in America? And I know this is just going to be, so about 10 million. So 5 to 10 million AR-15 style rifles are thought to exist. And this is an easy number to confirm because every firearm generally has a serial number. This doesn't include the 80% lowers, but most firearms have a serial number. All those serial numbers are documented in the Federal Firearms License Program. So anytime a firearm is created, it is registered that it exists, kind of like a birth certificate for a rifle. So if there's 5 to 10 million, let's use the low number. Let's use 5 million. And on average, people have, let's just say 5 magazines per rifle. That's 25 million so-called large capacity, and that's just for AR-15s. That doesn't include other types of, that doesn't include AK-47s. It doesn't include 10-22s. It doesn't include many other rifles that can take on a bigger than 10-round magazine. We are talking probably over 100 million. I would even say a billion, because there's 300 million firearms owned by Americans. But anything that carries more, that's every Glock. Every Glock, I think, carries more than 10 rounds. And so where are they going to get, if let's just say 100 million as a low number. That's how many large capacity magazines out there. 100 million. And I don't know, what are they going to give? $5 maybe for a large capacity magazine if they were to buy them all? That's $500 million just for the magazines. That doesn't include all the rifles. So there's 10 million at the high end, and let's say they give 150. That's $1.5 billion to buy back just the AR-15s. Doesn't include $1.5 billion with a B. That does not, and that's with the stupid price of 150, and it's even higher if you go up to 200 or 250 for a large. Because I'm telling you, you're gonna have to pay more than that. If you want my AR-15s, $150,000. That's what you can buy mine for. That's just one. And yet, like Emmanuel says, we're $21 trillion in debt. Yet somehow we're gonna buy back bump stocks, large capacity magazines, AR-15s, other assault rifles, using their word. It's just not gonna happen. And suppressors. Well, what he's calling silencers. This is absolutely asinine and stupid. The website, if you want to go look at it, ericswalwell.com. It's at ericswalwell.com/endgunviolence is the website. You can go read through this entire thing. And the reason it's important, again, is because this is the roadmap. This is the roadmap for the left. And even if they're not talking about it right now, this is what they want to get to. Eric Swalwell has done us a service by laying out the communist Democrat plan for taking away your firearms. Because that's where it starts. This whole idea of banning so-called assault weapons is to end gun violence. And yet, gun violence it's with these kinds of rifles that he's talking about banning, is all of 7% of mass shootings. 7%. Rifles are used in 27% of gun violence, supposedly. It depends on, I'm using liberal numbers here. So let's just assume that they get what they want and they ban assault rifles and they ban these things and all that kind of stuff. And wait a minute. Why isn't the gun violence problem solved? Well, because most gun violence, so-called gun violence is a myth, remember that, is committed with handguns. So you think they're going to stop at rifles? No, they're not going to stop at rifles. They're going to move from all of these rifles to semi-automatic handguns. And then when it doesn't stop, they're going to move to revolvers. And then when it doesn't stop, they'll probably move to ball and cap, black powder revolvers. And then when it doesn't stop, they'll do like the UK has done, and they'll move to kitchen knives. That's where this leads to. Let me end this podcast here by playing once again what's going to happen if you don't turn in your guns.
New Zealand was still mourning their dead, and they passed an assault weapons ban. So my ban would, buy back assault weapons. There's about 15 million of them. If you want to still possess them and not sell them back, you can keep them at a hunting club or a shooting range. I just don't think they belong in our churches, our theaters, at our shopping centers, at our concerts anymore.
And people would go to jail if they didn't hand those back.
We're not going to send cops, house to house, but like any other contraband, if you have it and you're, not supposed to, yeah, you would go to jail.
All right, so it would cost, he just used his number of 15 million so-called assault weapons are in the hands of Americans. Just to buy those back, assuming a $200 price tag, because that's about what most of the states and local governments are giving when they do these so-called buybacks. It's either $150 or $200, but for the assault weapons, usually it's like $200 or $250. So the average is about $200. So if we assume that the federal government is going to buy back all of those 15 million so-called assault rifles, that alone, just the assault rifles, without the high-capacity magazines, $3 billion with a B dollars. $3 billion. That's with a $200 price tag. So, all right. Let's see. I'm going to take a few minutes here now, and if I haven't paid a lot of attention to the chat room, so if you've asked a question in the chat room before that you actually truly wanted an answer for, now's the time to ask it. I'm going to close things up here, and I'm going to pay attention. I'll start here with Greg Gardner. Says, have you thought about the TAPS Act? Remind me what the TAPS Act is again. I'm actually going to look it up here real quick. Threat assessment, prevention, and safety. Oh, yeah, that's got to go. No, I don't support that at all. And I believe I can't remember if that's a Republican that's pushing that. So the reason I don't like the TAPS Act, and yes, I remember it now that I've looked it up real quick. The reason I don't really support that is I don't remember. Let's go back here. Let me go back to these 45 communist goals here. And this is why, because I'm going to tell you what the TAPS Act does, and I need to find this section in the communist goals that was published in 1963. Here it is. All right, number 39. So one of the things that the TAPS Act does is it identifies, it creates like a behavioral threat assessment and management process. And that is something that will supposedly be adapted and used differently depending on where you live, based on the needs of different communities. But it also provides states with resources that will create a multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment. What does that mean? So what that means is, and we're starting to see that already, Facebook has talked about, in order to identify hate, one of the things that Facebook does is it's not only managing kind of what you publish, but what you do in your real life and where you go and what you do out there. And so it creates this picture. And if it believes that you're a person full of hate or that you're some kind of a supremacist or something like that, then Facebook will use all of that information to ban you from Facebook. This is the same thing that the TAPS Act would do. And it fulfills number 39 of the communist goals that were read into the Congressional Record in 1963. This is number 39. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. Who gets to decide what is yes, Babin, that's it, Brian Babin, he's the one. And I can't remember, I think he's a Republican, right? Or is he a Democrat? I don't remember. It reads like a Democrat. But that's all this is, because who gets to decide what a mental illness is? There is actually a study out there, and you might agree with it, you might not. But there is actually a study out there that says liberalism is a mental illness. Now, I personally believe that. I mean, you look at liberals and how they act, I believe it's a mental illness. Look at how they're reacting to Trump. So if government gets to decide what a mental illness is, and they're doing these sort of assessments, these minority report type things, then what's to stop them from disarming you and I? So I absolutely oppose, this is why I oppose the TAPS Act. So thanks for that question. Let's see. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Oh, gosh. I just don't care enough that I've actually even thought about the debate on that. Yeah, he is a Republican. Thank you. That's what I thought. I knew he was a Republican because these Republicans... See, this is the problem with Republicans right now. And again, if you got a question up here, I've got about 4 minutes. So if you got a question, you got 4 minutes to give it. The Republicans are trying to pretend like they're doing something. They feel like they have this need. They feel like they have to do something. And so they do things that they think are minor and that sound good and that most people will buy off on. Because, look, even if the Republicans aren't outright communists, they are definitely influenced by communists. Otherwise, they wouldn't even talk about these kinds of things. But they feel like they have to believe they're doing something. And this is weird. David Brandt, you just said hot dogs kill children. For some reason, I had to approve that comment. Hot dogs kill children. Is the word kill not allowed on YouTube? I don't know why I had to approve your comment. But I hate that. I hate when I hear a politician say, we've got to do something. We've got to act now. This is a crisis. This is an emergency. When a politician says several things, you need to do the exact opposite. When they say we have to act now, we need to wait. When he says you don't need something, you probably need it, especially as it relates to firearms. So yeah, it makes my blood boil too. All right, let's see. Yeah, every police interaction is already a pharmacological encounter. Pharmacist agrees, anyone? Yeah, Eggman, and not only that, but now our police are expected to recognize like mental illnesses, and they're, you know, what drives me nuts is when you have an issue, a mental health issue with a family member, what drives me nuts is when people call the police, because the police are not doctors. The person you need to call is a doctor, because what's going to happen is if you've got someone that's out of control because their whatever their mental illness is triggering, the cops are just going to come and kill them. That's what the cops are going to do. They're just going to kill them. And I don't know why my doctor keeps trying to call me, as a matter of fact. My pain doctor has been trying to call me this whole podcast. All right, guys. I've got 2 minutes here. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to scroll up a little bit and see if I can find one that maybe I would have missed. Anyway, thank y'all for listening. You can click that little $sign at the bottom if you want to help keep me updated. You can also, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Click the notification bell. What I'm being told now also is that my videos, when I go live, you're not getting notices. So click that notification bell. That should help in some cases, but not in all cases. Yes, Emmanuel, that cop that killed the guy in Costco, I can't wait to see the video on that. I don't think this cop that says he feared for his life, sorry, I'm not buying that. I think we had a hot-headed cop who just killed a supposedly autistic dude. We'll find that out. All right. Y'all take care. Be safe. Be free. I will see y'all next time. I forgot. I got to turn this off over here. I will see y'all next time. And if you got any questions or if there's something you want me to cover, send me an email, cj@cjgrisham.com. And I've got some changes coming up to my life. I'm getting ready to start law school in August, and I look forward to doing that. I also don't look forward to going back to school. But take care. Be safe, everyone, and be free.